Hello and welcome back to another episode of my 1973 Datsun 240Z restoration that I'm completing in this one-car garage. In this episode, as I mentioned previously, what I would like to do is to get the rear subframe out of this car. And let me kind of show you, I've looked out underneath it, got an idea of how I'm going to approach this, so let me take you down there. So there are two ways that you can go about taking the rear subframe / suspension, however you want to describe it, out of one of these cars. You can either A, take it all out individual, piece by piece, all out on its own, or you can drop the entirety of the rear suspension out and just wheel it out from the back of the car and then go about disassembling it from there instead of doing it underneath the car. My initial plan was going to be to take out the suspension piece by piece, just so that way everything is kind of fixed in place for the most part. It's gonna be an easier time breaking bolts free. That was my initial plan. I wanted to go in and start with just getting the axles out because I want to get the axles out, try and drop the differential first, and then go about taking down the rest of it with a little bit less weight, given that the differential would not be in place. However, all of the old differential axle shaft bolts, all of those are really stuck in place. I've tried soaking them down, letting them sit for a while, hitting them with a wrench. It's not happening. I can only get the open end of the wrench onto there to try to crack them free, but they are not coming out for anything. I even tried using my little mallet, trying to put a little bit of shock load into them to get them to crack free. Still nothing. So I've shifted my plans. Instead of dropping this out piece by piece, it looks like I'm going to be dropping this whole assembly out as one unit. So what I'm going to do to try to make it a little more manageable is obviously I have to get the car up into the air now. And I'm going to try to get as high as I can reasonably get it safely. But it's also going to entail me taking the wheels off because that's going to let this all sit down significantly lower. It's not going to roll around as easily, but it'll give me a better shot at being able to pull this out from underneath the car and be able to tackle it from there. Because once I've got all this off, I'm gonna have the spindle pins, which are right there to address, which those are gonna be a nightmare in themselves. But I will also be able to actually kind of use the U-joints to my advantage and turn them out of the way, so I'll have more access to actually trying to break those nuts and bolts free. Or if they still don't want to come free, I'll have a better shot at cutting them, just so that way I can preserve the flanges and everything and just source some new bolts. So that is the new plan for how I'm going to take this out. So I'm going to get this jacked up and get to work. All right, so I have all the bolts that I can initially reach cracked loose. There are 3 bolts at the top of each rear strut tower that is going to hold the strut in. And down here, oh, also get the parking brakes loose before you forget about them. It'll be easier while it's all still attached. Up there, right about there, and right about there, and same on the other side as well. There are 2, I believe they're 14mm bolts per side at the front of the diff brace support mount right there. You get those loose. I also, let me move the light so you can see a little better. There are also the 2 bolts that are going to hold the differential to the mustache bar, as that is called. And then up right there, that is the other end of the mustache bar. That's bolted straight to the, that is attached straight to the body. That is a 17mm nut. Same on the other side. And once I get the diff bolts loose at the back and at the front, that's going to let the diff come down as it is. I can then remove the mustache bar. And then up here, I don't think I can actually get you where you'll be able to see it. But behind this, on the other side, there are 2 bolts. That is what is going to be holding on to this little cross brace right here for the lower control arms. Once I have, that'll be the last thing I'm able to access and crack loose. But once I have that out, and also once I fully undo the struts, this should all come down. The diff is going to hang down on its own, because I can't do anything about the axle shafts for right now. So that is my plan of attack since I can't get out the axle shafts. If I could, this would be a lot easier. I would just do this all probably piece by piece. But since I can't, I'm gonna be taking it out this way and disassembling it out from under the car. So I'm gonna get to getting those bolts out. Also, I just remembered, undo your brakes. You're gonna have a bad time if you forget to undo those and you crack a line or do something terrible. So make sure you undo your brake hoses. This did not go smoothly, but it is out. So I wanted to pull everything out the back of the car, like I mentioned, which did not happen. This had to get pulled out the side of the car, and it didn't really do it in any nice manner. It all pretty well fell apart because since the parking brake can't be held on anymore if you want to actually take this out, the axle is left to free spin as it pleases. So once I loosened up, I think it was whenever I loosened up the strut tower, it all dropped down significantly because there was nothing holding it up. Then whenever I started to release the lower control arm, the back one, it kind of cocked out. And then once I started to take this one, that was the forward one, I believe, then it just kind of took whichever direction decided it wanted to go and fell in that direction. I kind of realized this was going to happen while I was doing it, but there wasn't a whole lot of other options because, as I said, these differential flange bolts, or these drive shaft, half shaft bolts, whatever you call them, they're completely rusted and seized together. With more access to them now, an impact won't take them off. At least my impact won't take them off. Just, going crazy with it, trying to hold on to it and crack it free. Not realistically going to happen. So I'm considering just going ahead and just cutting those bolts to get them free so I can separate these into more manageable pieces, because this is not going to be a fun time. I'm expecting it not to be a fun time. So I'm probably going to leave this semi-assembled for a while until I can get more done on the car, until I'm really realistically ready to actually start rebuilding this kind of stuff. And doing the same thing for that side, and still pulling that last little section that is still hanging down right there, just because I really couldn't get any good access to it with all of this in place, because this is not the order you're supposed to take any of this out in. So nonetheless, this is how it's gone. This isn't the way I would recommend doing it, but this is the way that I had to do it because I couldn't separate the axles from the differential and the suspension. So this is a little bit messy, but nonetheless, I'm going to go back under here, see if I can't get that piece out, just so everything's out from under here. Clean up back here a little bit, and go ahead and probably throw the front on jack stands and start going after the front subframe. Okay, so the car is officially up in the air. I've got the wheels off, and I'm about to start taking apart, the stuff that's attaching the subframe to the car, anything that's going to bind up whenever I try to drop the subframe out. So what I'm going to do is disconnect the steering shaft from the little coupler right there. I'm also going to undo the brake hard line, or the brake soft line right here from the car, because that's all going to come off with the knuckle spindle setup. And what I'm also probably going to do is see if I can't crack some of this stuff loose while it's still connected to the car, even though it's, stuff I could feasibly all drop as one unit. It'll probably be easier for me to get these apart for whenever I want to go ahead later and replace these bushings or clean up the hardware, doing it while the car is still kind of holding it in place to give it a little better bite and to try to break through all of that rust that I've got there. Now, a couple things one thing I want to ask and one thing I want to show. On here, as I pulled the wheel off, my little dust boot for my bearing was actually loose like this. It wasn't firmly affixed onto the car and staying in place. And if I push it in, it'll just pop right back out. So I did these wheel bearings, probably 200, 300 miles or so ago. And this is the only time I've dealt with this style of, bearing setup where it's all up in the rotor and it's exposed and you have to set the preload on the bearing. by tightening the little nut with the cotter pin right there. I don't know if maybe this is a sign that I have the bearing too tight and it's pushing out against the dust cap, and that's why it's pushing out. I don't know. So if you've dealt with this before and you know why that happens, let me know. It's just I need a new dust cap, which might also be the case. Let me know, because I'm curious, because I just noticed that whenever I pulled this off. Another thing, this was kind of my little hack fix that I had to do for the car. These, I'm sure, are the original lug nuts that probably came with these wheels, because these are a really cool wheel. Obviously, the appearance of them is really cool, but this is the old school, I'm assuming it's the old school style of, you know, having a 4x100 or 4x114.3 bolt pattern. The washers right here for, now I can't get this one out now. The washers for the lugs actually come out. So what you can do, if you want 114.3 like old Datsuns are, you have the hole on the outboard side, and that's going to center it for 4x114.3. If you want to run this as 4x100, you turn it around, you set it back in place, and you put on a car with a 4x100 setup. So, I mean, these are probably 14x7s and, like, you know, 0 offsets. You could put this on like a Honda or something like that if you really wanted to. I don't know if you'd have any kind of clearance for the brakes or anything back there, but feasibly you could, just because you have these little things. However, because of that, like I said, these are probably the lug nuts that came with these wheels whenever they were purchased back in the early 80s. So one of them had gone missing over time, and the previous owner or a shop just put a random lug nut on there, not the right thread pitch. I don't know how it stayed on for the, you know, probably 1,000 miles that I put on the car, up to the point that I discovered that lug nut was incorrect. But they didn't sell that style of lug nut in the thread pitch for this car at the parts store. So I was able to order some online, but for a stopgap, what I ended up having to do was I bought a, you know, shank and washer lug. I'm hoping you can see it if it'll focus here. I actually had to go after this with an angle grinder and kind of lathe this down slightly, just so that way the diameter of this would fit through the washer. Now, also, the other thing is, now that one's stuck. It does fit. I ran it on like this. But the other thing I also had to do with this was also to run a couple of the washers to space it out, so that way I would get thread engagement all the way down without this being loose on the lug. So kind of the little hack that I had to do, you know, not overly proud of it, but, you know, at the same time, it got the car by for a while. So nonetheless, here's where I'm going now, is to crack that stuff loose and start dropping the subframe. Okay, so almost the entirety of the front suspension is now out from underneath the 240Z. As you can see, I've got the, you know, front cross member, the struts, the hub assembly, all that is already off. The only thing that has stayed in place is the anti-roll bar, and only by one bolt, because if I can bring it in here, let me scroll down here. This bolt right there, oh, sorry, back bolt, right there. That one is, it's not seized in place so much as it is, but the captive nut that lives inside the frame right there, it's rusted out, it's spun, so there's no way to loosen it up without getting a wrench on the nut that's back there. So in this process, I did find a new rust hole right there. That one goes into the engine bay. The frame rail is somewhere about here-ish. So I'm gonna be doing a good bit of work on the fender liners, you know, on this side and the other side both. They're pretty rusted out. I do have a repair section for back here that I believe extends either to like right there or to right there. I don't remember for sure, but plainly I have some pretty bad rust going forward. So I don't know exactly what I'm gonna be doing about this. This is where the brackets for the front bumper mounts. As you can see, one of those bolts did shear off because it was seized up, because this is a pretty bad water trap. As I've discovered, the other side is actually worse. Like, it was really starting to eat into the metal behind it on the other side. So, you know, I probably got this same deal happening over there too. So that, honestly, the damage right here might be what pushes me to go into like the really thin, early car bumpers, because I've got like the stop gap between the small sleek bumpers and the big ugly bumpers. So I really didn't hate mine, but that might be what forces me to make a change. Nonetheless, it is out. So I've got both of the subframes out of the car now. So there's gonna be a lot of cleanup in this garage coming for me, because it's getting to the point where it's pretty ineffective to work. Really, for me, all that's kind of left, like I said, is just to get this place cleaned up for one. But the next thing that you're going to be likely to see me doing with this car is going to be, probably either pulling the interior out, seeing if I can find an extra set of hands, getting the hatch and the doors off, because they are the last big items that are on the car, save for like the dashboard. But the dashboard I could reasonably get out on my own and not be too terribly worried about damaging it. It's already got cracks in it, so I'm not trying to save a pristine dash, but obviously I don't want to make mine any worse. But the hatch and the doors, I really don't want to mess up, because my big goal, one of the big goals, this is obviously a big goal of the project, is to not have to do any exterior body work to the car. Not that it doesn't need it, but that's its whole own mess, adventure, and very expensive at that too. Exterior body work, so much more, I don't want to say time consuming, but it's so much more labor into getting everything perfect versus underneath the car. And structurally, it's like, it doesn't have to look like a show car. It just needs to be strong and perform and do all that stuff. And that stuff I feel reasonably confident I'm going to be able to do. I've done a little bit of welding in the past on my Mazda. I'm going to get to do a lot of it. One, building the jig out of the square sections of steel I have over there. They'll give me some good work on some thicker sections of steel. And like I said, I've done some on the Mazda on some thinner sections. So I think I'll be able to do a pretty good job getting this thing squared away and ready. But I'm starting to ramble. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close the video out here. We got some good progress done today. Got the subframes out. So this thing is pretty well just a shell at this point. I appreciate you guys following along, watching. If you have comments, please absolutely go ahead, drop them down below. Let me know kind of what you think. If you know anything about those wheel bearings up there, I'm just kind of curious on that one. But yeah, go ahead, comment. If you want to subscribe and see more of this, there is going to be more coming, because obviously we still have all of the work to do. This is still the teardown. Teardown is honestly going to be probably the easy part. We want to, you're going to get to see me go from the easy stuff, which is just getting it down to a project, and then digging my way back up and out of this hole that I'm literally basically creating for myself. And like the video too. Liking helps out. It, shows people are interested and enjoy what they see, and, hopefully get this in front of some other eyes of people, that can help out or learn from this, and, just get some good dialogue going. So I'm going to round this out here. So I thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoy your days. Happy New Year. That's when I'm shooting this right now. It's probably going to be a little past New Year by the time I set this out. So hopefully you all have a great 2023. You all get your projects done. That's a big one. And yeah, so take it easy. Thank you for watching.